The story of this serial killer can shock you with its violent details. He spent $100,000 to build his torture van and traveled around America looking for women to subject to extreme pain and suffering. His girlfriend and his daughter helped him torture and kill his victims. The police couldn't find them for over 40 years. His name is David Parker Ray. He's one of the most violent mass murderers in history. Ray was born on November 6, 1939, in Belen, New Mexico. There isn't much information about his childhood. He and his sister were raised by their grandfather, but Ray often visited his father, who regularly beat him. His father also gave him adult magazines with sadist undertones, which likely influenced his future actions. As a teenager, Ray was bullied by his classmates because he was shy around girls. He initially found comfort in alcohol and later turned to heavier substances. Even in school, he was already thinking about torturing and murdering women. One time, his sister found his drawings vividly illustrating his fantasies. After graduating high school, Ray joined the army. Later, he had 4 marriages, but none lasted. He had 2 children, and his daughter became his accomplice, helping him commit his horrendous crimes. It's difficult to pinpoint when Ray decided to go on his killing spree, but the police believe his criminal career might have lasted 50 years. All that time, it wasn't that he couldn't be found. Investigators didn't even know a serial killer was operating right under their noses. They only got wind of his activities when one of his victims managed to escape. On March 22, 1999, a police department in Elephant Butte received a call from people living in a trailer. They reported that a strange young girl had basically crawled into their place. The police officers who arrived were shocked by her appearance. Officer Jones later admitted she was the strangest girl he'd seen in his 24-year career. The girl turned out to be 22-year-old Cynthia Vigil. She was wearing only a steel collar, and her whole body was covered with scratches, cuts, and burns. After receiving medical help, Cynthia told detectives her shocking story. On March 19, 1999, Cynthia, who worked as a prostitute, was looking for a client in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A man approached her, introduced himself as a police officer in civilian clothes, and arrested her for prostitution. He handcuffed her and put her in the back seat of his car, then drove to a trailer parked in the middle of nowhere. What Cynthia experienced over the next 3 days was beyond her worst nightmares. David and his accomplice Cindy Hendy tied her to a chair resembling a gynecological chair and tortured her for 3 days. They had a toolbox filled with instruments for inflicting extreme pain. Before the torture, they showed her a cassette of another woman being abused in the same chair. According to Cynthia, they wanted to give her a vivid idea of what was about to happen to her. The cassette also had instructions from Ray, explaining how the victim was supposed to behave. She had to address him as Sir, and his female companion as Madam, and she couldn't speak without permission. Here is a bit of information provided by the serial killer in the recording. This recording is created on July 23, 1993, as a general consultation footage for women kept in our possession. The information I'm going to give you is based on my experience with captives that span several years. If we make any significant changes in the way our procedures are conducted in the future, this recording will be updated. You're obviously here against your will, completely helpless. You don't know where you are and have no idea what's going to happen to you. You're either very scared or very angry. I'm sure you've already tried to free your wrists and ankles and realized you can't do it. Now you're just waiting to see what's going to happen next. Cynthia pointed out that Ray said all of those horrible things very calmly and confidently, as if torturing and killing women were just his normal everyday activities. He also promised to kill her after all the abuse, just like he had killed all of his other victims. On the 3rd day of horrible tortures, Cynthia got a chance to escape. Ray went to work, leaving his accomplice to keep an eye on her. Hendy accidentally left the keys to the shackles near Cynthia. She managed to reach the keys and free her arms. When Hendy noticed, she tried to stop Cynthia, but the victim was faster. Cynthia grabbed a kitchen icebreaker tool that was lying around and drove it into her tormentor's neck. She escaped the trailer completely naked, wearing a metal collar and heavy chains around her wrists. Desperate, she knocked on the door of a nearby trailer and got lucky. The owner was home and opened the door. After hearing what she had to say, he called the police. The police immediately started searching for David Parker Ray and his accomplice, but no one was in the trailer. The torturers were searching the neighboring areas for their escaped victim. That's where they got arrested. When investigators entered the trailer, they were completely shocked. The van looked inconspicuous from the outside, but inside it was an actual torture chamber. Hundreds of torture tools hung on the walls. There was a chair in the middle that resembled a gynecological chair, equipped with straps to immobilize victims, and a huge mirror on the ceiling so the poor girls could see everything happening to them. They also found 643 discs and cassettes with perverted content, some recorded by Ray himself and his girlfriend. The police started playing the disc in the DVD player at the time and saw extremely disturbing and shocking images. The 81-minute recording featured Ray ceaselessly torturing a woman and highly enjoying the process. Later, the police discovered that the trailer cost $100,000 and the sadistic tools used to torture women cost at least $24,000. The van was soundproof, preventing anyone from hearing the victim's screams. Ray called his creation a toy box, confirming that he saw his tortures and murders as mere entertainment. After Ray's arrest, the police found out that his 31-year-old daughter, Jessica Ray, also helped commit these horrifying crimes. She brought another victim to her father, her friend Kelly Garrett, on July 24, 1996. That evening, Kelly had fought with her husband and decided to play pool with Jessica. The torturer's daughter spiked her drink and took her to her father's trailer, where he abused her for 2 days. Ray then cut Kelly's throat and left her by the roadside. Miraculously, Kelly survived, but neither her husband nor the police believed her. Her husband thought she made up the abduction story to excuse infidelity, and the police didn't investigate further. The reason these sadists could abduct and kill women for years without being noticed by the police was that David Parker Ray pumped his victims with potent substances. As a result, they either couldn't remember what happened to them, or their memories were too blurry and fragmented. Kelly couldn't recall details but knew who had abducted and tortured her. After the arrests, another victim, Angelica Montano, came forward. She was an acquaintance of Ray, who had once asked him for pie ingredients. Ray tied her up, drugged, and tortured her before letting her go. The police found Angelica walking naked through a desert, but again, no one investigated because she couldn't remember details. Her words were taken seriously the second time, and her testimony helped solidify the case against the torturers. Realizing further denial was impossible, Ray's accomplice Cindy admitted everything and agreed to tell investigators about all the murders she knew. Ray revealed he had another accomplice, his friend Dennis Roy Yancey, who admitted to killing a girl named Mary Parker after Ray and his daughter had tortured her for several days. The court found the case extremely complicated. None of the identified victims could remember details of their abductions, and investigators didn't know the approximate number of victims. They couldn't understand Ray's logic, as he let some girls go but killed others. The trial continued for almost 2 years, but investigators couldn't prove Ray's involvement in any murders. The FBI was convinced the torturers had killed more than 60 women, but the killers refused to disclose details of their crimes. Even Ray's diaries, describing the murders of at least 50 women, didn't provide enough evidence. The main problem was that the police couldn't find the bodies of all the other victims. Even if they had, another problem would have emerged. The murders would have to be directly connected to Ray, and establishing such a connection without hard evidence is almost impossible. In the end, David Parker Ray was sentenced to 224 years in prison for abduction, torture, and abuse. His accomplice, Cindy Hendy, was sentenced to 36 years but was released on parole on July 15, 2019. The sentence of Parker Ray's daughter astonished people the most. She was sentenced to just 2.5 years in prison and was on probation for 5 years. After her release, she wrote a book called My Father's Lair. David himself spent the least amount of time in prison. After being sentenced on May 28, 2002, the sadist died from a heart attack at the age of 62. His death meant that investigators lost their last hope of uncovering more details about his crimes. Most likely, we'll never find out how many people were abducted and murdered by these killers. We'll keep you updated as more information becomes available. Stay informed. Stay safe. Subscribe for more updates. Thank you for watching.